Hi guys, so Penny Mordaunt, Minister of State for Trade Policy, was speaking to GB News about trade deals with US states, not the United States. As we know, Joe Biden and his administration poured cold water on an FTA with the UK some months ago. So in order to keep Brexiteers happy, Penny has been flying to the US in an attempt to sign trade deals with individual states like Texas. She tried to spin this as a success, but there's one major problem with all of that.
We've left the EU. There was a lot of criticism about that. We're still working through some of the issues related to that. But this is a massive opportunity for us, but also countries like the United States who share our vision of capitalism. So I've been spending a lot of time there. We're in round 6 of our negotiations for the federal deal. That's the one that looks at tariffs and removing those big barriers to trade. But actually where most of the regulation sits and most of the opportunity sits is at state level and local level. 93% of the growth in the US is generated by some particular metro areas. So I thought it was sensible for us to concentrate there whilst we're still negotiating the FTA.
Okay, the problem with the FTA is that, as I said at the beginning, Joe Biden has poured cold water on that, and doesn't seem to be going anywhere. But even if you sign agreements, now these are not trade deals, these are agreements with individual member states of the United States. They can't sign deals with the UK that would breach federal rules. So they can sign whatever they want, but if they must always be within the scope of federal rules. So it's not a trade deal you're signing with individual states like California or Texas. You're signing agreements with them. But the bigger problem with all of this is that we will never know what's actually contained within these trade deals or agreements, because Parliament will not be allowed to scrutinise it. Boris Johnson instructed his MPs to vote against measures to scrutinise them. So it doesn't matter what's contained. Nobody will ever know until they're implemented. We won't know if they're good or bad because no one will be able to look inside them.
Intriguing. Earlier on, Hamish McRae, the political economist with The Independent and the Mail, was on, and so was Arlene Foster, who said, actually that analysis applies to India as well, and where Boris was recently, that you can cut a deal with Modi, but the reality of how India functions in the modern world is also state by state.
Well, trade deals are a starting point. They're removing barriers to trade. The things that we're doing at state level are going to remove barriers to trade. Ultimately, it's about bringing people together, people, money and ideas to...
But you people want to do less trade with your neighbours. You want to do less trade with the European Union, with those European countries. How can you say it's about bringing people together? Obviously, it's not about bringing people together. It's about selling people stuff. That's what a trade deal is about. It's not about bringing people together. It's about, I want to sell you stuff. I want to buy stuff from you that I don't produce in my country, and I want to sell you stuff that you don't produce in your country. And if you're trying to sell me stuff that I already produce, well, I'm going to put up tariffs to protect my industries. Now, the UK government doesn't seem to be willing to do that because they've signed agreements, trade deals with, for example, New Zealand and Australia, which is going to decimate British farming. Was that sold as bringing people together as well?
Solve problems, to create new business opportunities. That's what we're trying to do. So we've got to put the hard work in. We've got to re-establish those connections. In the US, we are talking to 20 states. Currently, that's going to be a growing number. The first 8 deals we're going to sign represent about 20% of the US economy. This is big stuff. It will reduce costs for business. It will open up new opportunities.
Reduce costs for business? What are you talking about here? We need to see details. Because we've heard this before. We heard about how Australia was going to be a wonderful trade deal for Britain, and it's an absolute disaster. We heard about how Japan would be a wonderful trade deal, and the European Union signed a better one. you have to present something. You have to present some detail so we can actually look at it and say, okay, this is a good trade deal or agreement with each of these individual states. But we don't have that.
For UK businesses, and make it easier for them to actually provide services and goods to the US. And we're also creating some very interesting partnerships, pairing up particular states or large cities with parts of the UK, which again will forge some really interesting partnerships and opportunities.
But this is like twinning towns or twinning cities. How does this affect trade? Like, when it comes to trade, there have to be certain standards or requirements met, and they have to be enforced. That's what we're talking about when it comes to tariffs as well. If the UK, for example, reduces its standards, then tariffs will be imposed on goods from the UK into the European Union. So if the UK, after it signed the free trade agreement with the European Union, if it doesn't respect that, if it doesn't maintain a minimum standard, if it falls below the EU standard, then the EU will say, well, we're going to impose tariffs on your goods. And the same with the US. The US will say, if you don't respect our standards, then you're not going to be able to export your goods into our country. Or there will be tariffs imposed upon that. But once again, we're not hearing any detail. It's just about bringing people together and twinning towns or something like that.
What Hamish McRae also said was it's a kind of recognition that globalism itself is redefining itself, and you're playing a part in that, and so is Boris Johnson in India.
Well, when people say to me, what is our role in the world, I say it's to be ourselves. And actually, Ukraine...
What the hell does that mean? Our role in the world is to be ourselves.
The situation there, I think, is getting us to remember who we are as a nation and what we have to offer, that convening power for people, money and ideas, to bring those things together. We hate seeing bullies. We want to stand up for freedom, and we're moved and motivated when we see courage in other people. And that's what our country's about. We can do a huge amount, whether it's on trade, on national security or defence, as we are in Ukraine.
Now, I just want to highlight this story that was published on the same day, on Sunday. It says here from RTE, Irish News, it says, deal agreed over sheep meat exports to EU. Irish lamb could soon be on US menus after agreement was reached with the US Department of Agriculture to allow Irish sheep meat plants formally apply for export permits. So, Ireland is part of the European Union, obviously. The European Union has this agreement with the United States to allow, for example, sheep meat to be imported into the US, and Ireland is benefiting from that. Now, if the UK was a member of the European Union still, it would also benefit from that. But it's not benefiting from that because it doesn't have a trade deal with the US. It doesn't have the same type of agreements that the EU has. So here we have Penny going to different parts of the US trying to say, look, okay, we can't sign a trade deal with the federal government, let's try and sign an agreement with you. But no one's actually going to see what the detail is. This makes no sense to me whatsoever. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.